So yeah, my name is Katie Heath, and I am a person in recovery as well. 19 years ago, whenever I decided, or actually the state of Illinois decided that I needed to sit down for a little while, I got into the I went into the prison system, and I think the first question they said, set your goals for post-release. And I said, well, I want to be a substance abuse counselor. They said, well, you could try. I was like, okay. So I got my GED, went through. When I became a client at the agency that I was referred to post-release, I said, when I grow up, I'm gonna be a substance abuse counselor. They said, yeah, that's a great idea, but it's highly likely that you would not ever be hired at this agency because you're a felon. So I go to college, enroll, my associates, because I got my GED in prison. The guidance counselor said, well, what field are you gonna go into? And I said, rehabilitation, counseling, or whatever. And they said, yeah, well, that you're gonna take a risk because it may be a waste of time for you. So, challenges kept meeting challenges. I started using substances, alcohol, marijuana, after I had experienced a sexual assault that I did not talk about by a family member. And when I finally did disclose, I was pretty much removed from that family. And we ended up kind of relocating. Throughout all of that, my substance use switched to my drug of choice being methamphetamine and cocaine. During that time, I delivered a substance-affected child, so I was involved with DCFS. In May of 2004, DEA kicked in my door, was sentenced to 4 years in prison. I found out a week before I was going to prison that I was pregnant with my second child. I delivered my child while I was in prison, 24 hours with him. Somebody had to pick him up. I went back to prison. Thankfully, I qualified for what was a mother-child reunification program, so I was able to finish the remainder of my IDOC sentence in Chicago with my son, my youngest son. My oldest son would come and see me, but his dad was around the age of my mom, big cocaine dealer, so that I tell my story a lot of different places, and I have for a few years because it keeps me in check to be able to do that. I came home in January of 2006 for my Department of Corrections time. 3 months later, 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm feeding my baby a bottle, and I hear that sound. It's the United States of America on a federal indictment for conspiracy to manufacture. So I was back in the custody on state parole and now facing federal charges. Within 1 week of looking at 11 years, my charges were enhanced, and I was looking at a mandatory minimum of 20 years. So throughout all that time, I was clean. I had no relapses. I had a really good support system. I was trying to do all the things, single mom, 2 kids, working, going to school, in services, and fighting my federal case. My federal case ended up making national headlines because the federal judge in Benton, Honorable Judge Gilbert, recused him, stood up and said, she does not deserve this. Like, she's learned her lesson. She did everything you're supposed to do when you're in the Department of Corrections or education. She's working, all these things. And if you're gonna make me sentence her to 20 years, I'm not gonna do it. And literally, like, mic dropped and walked out of the courtroom. And I was like, oh my gosh. I don't know how many times I looked at my attorney and said, what just happened? And he said, I don't know. And that's not a really good thing to go through when you're like United States of America SEAL and you're going like, and he's like, oh no. And so I'm like, great, So throughout all of this, I lived in a very small town with a very small town mindset, lingering nickname and reputation, trying to get a job. Oh my gosh, you're on the front page of the paper. We don't really need that in our restaurant. But actually, the local grocery store took a chance on me only because I just really, really hounded him. Like every week would go in and be like, dude, like the cheerleader that you hired is already quit. I'm a mom, I need to work. So I've already seen a couple of faces change. And he's like, you're paying that much attention? I'm like, yes, I need this job. So I ended up getting the job at the grocery store, and I ended up fighting the case. My federal case went through for about 3 years. It was almost exactly 3 years to the day that I was released from the Department of Corrections, Illinois Department of Corrections, that I was moved out of Benton into East St. Louis court set, and Judge Murphy actually sentenced me to time served. And so thankfully, only by the grace of God, I was able to get my IDOC time considered valuable time. And I did not have to go to spend 20 years, because as I stand here today, I would still be in prison. I mean, that's, Judge Gilbert asked me to come to his courtroom not too long ago, and it never dawned on me, like I've been doing this for a long time, and it never dawned on me, but when he said that day, like sitting there, which was super awkward to be on the other side of the table, but he said, you would still, if I had done what the United States government wanted me to do, you would still be in prison, Katie. And I mean, it just was very humbling. It was just like a big, like, wake up, like, oh my gosh, I'm so blessed. But, lived experience is valuable, especially in the substance use work and in the community and in the workforce. Lived experience isn't something that can be taught in college. So like through the federal stuff, I was my associates and then my bachelor's and then, my master's. And that's not, I would sit in the rooms, and I'm obviously older. Kids are calling, and they're with some younger people, I knew things personally that the education wasn't teaching me. And so it's knowing how to get your charges expunged. It's knowing how to get your license back. It's knowing how to build from the bottom up. It's knowing how to curve balls and things like that. People living in recovery and working in the field is changing the narrative. I mean, it really is. This is when I was in the first stages of counseling, because I wanted all the things. I remember being in the women's treatment center and saying, look, I said I had addiction to meth. They thought it was methadone because that's how early, this was like in 04, 05. So they didn't even have like a code for it. And I'm like, no, methamphetamine, like it's speed, it's bad, it's real bad. I said, give me a toolbox. I need the biggest toolbox with all of the tools I could possibly have, because I'm going back to my community. I have another child there. I need to know how to be a good mom. I need to know how to do all of this while staying clean, because little did I know, these federal things were coming. And so, I come back home, and we didn't have peer coverage. There was no peer supports, none of that stuff. It was like, okay, here's your assessment, which, I've learned now working in the field that when they come in, I'm like, hi, I'm Katie. I know you're lying to me. It's fine. Like, here's 100 million questions I have to ask you, and you're not going to be honest on our first meeting. I get it. I'm fine. Here's a little bit about me, so now you can breathe, because they see somebody sitting at a desk with like their makeup and hair and clothes or whatever, and they're like, you don't have any idea. And I'm like, oh, do I ever? Like I know all the things. I've literally been in every system some way, somehow. So, this is real life. I came from, my dad was an alcoholic. My brother was an alcoholic, so I've lived around it. And so, yes, all things. I can't say I know exactly what you're going through, but I've definitely gone through my own things. But I've watched that change with peer cover, and there was like some stigma in the beginning. I remember, when I've been at the Egyptian Health Department for 14 years now, and I've worked in a couple different departments, because that's what we do there. We jump around. So, and now I work with kids in the juvenile justice system, so that's great. I have a bunch of teenagers on my caseload, and they're all going through things, but being able to rely on a peer recovery support person or someone that is also living, it's like they get it too. So, coming in, it's not just all professional, all the jargon, all the things. You're able to connect with somebody who has also probably likely navigated how to get their kids back, or, how maybe they didn't have a driver's license, or maybe they struggled. Have you ever been convicted of a felony? I would put on the application, see attached sheet. Because what, you can't, the line's this long. The charges in itself are longer than that. Yeah, so, and then, it's like, what are you going to do? You're a felon. You can't, passing boards. You can't work in the schools. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't do this. And I'm like, okay, look, I've been told that from day one. And I'm never going to let that stop me from doing what I want, or trying to at least do. And I go in the schools now. Thankfully last year I was able, finally, I did file the paperwork to get my state charges expunged, and they were granted. I was very thankful for the support that I do. I now get to have lunch with the federal judge, and so he's got to sign off, and it's called a presidential pardon, but like, I don't think it gets to like Biden's desk or anything. I don't know. It's probably like an office or a committee, but I am going to try to work to get the federal stuff done too. But we get it. We get the ups and downs, being in recovery, being in the field. We get the setbacks. We get the progress. Like sometimes like even just 2 or 3 steps forward doesn't even feel like it's 2 or 3 steps forward. And we get the one day at a time, and we get those kinds of things. And that's what's something that I feel like that is, I've heard about stigma. I've heard about, the Department of Corrections. There's so many things that are just like so prevalent. It's changing the mindset that, you're, yes, once an addict, always an addict, but it doesn't mean you're like an addict. Like you're recovering. Like everyone wants to say it's one way or this person's got, and I'm not going to sit at a table that talks about people, because y'all talked about me too, probably at some point in time. Without a doubt. That's not the people I surround myself with, because somebody did take a chance on me. When I was working in that grocery store, our CEO would come in there to get her groceries, and I'm not even kidding you. I'd be like, hey, switch me registers. So I would have to talk to her. She would have to talk to me, and then I'd be like, hey, got any jobs out there like that I would work? like what's up? Or if I'd see like anybody with a badge, I'd be like, I'm in school. Like, what's going on out there? I did interview for 3 different positions before I was hired on, and I was very thankful for that. But giving people a chance, because in like El Dorado's, where I'm from, it is very difficult, because everybody does know your name. It's like Cheers, where everyone knows your name. Like, I get it, but we all deserve a chance. And it's crazy that if 1, 2, 3 people start to believe in you, the confidence that you do get from that, in that belief, and somebody being there for me changes so many things, and even the drive and motivation to continue to do better. Because every year I get to go to SIU Trauma Fellows and present my entire story. I have a PowerPoint too. I didn't do it tonight because it's really long. But I go into the Trauma Fellows, and this is in a room full of college students that are they're going through their masters into social work. And so I tell this story because I'm like, I was a tumbleweed, and there was never a teacher or anyone that said, are you okay? How can I help you? And my tumbleweed just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, until, like I said, the state of Illinois, Saline County, decided that I needed to sit down. I call it my stay-K. It's fine. I don't want any more of those. But I get to talk about signs and symptoms and things to look for in the student, like when you go into the social work, whether it be in school or, if you're going into substance, field. You don't have necessarily, somebody said, well, am I going to be a good counselor if I've not lived it? Well, absolutely. But you also need to be open-minded about, like, it may have been a lot easier for you to make a decision where it's a little bit of a struggle and a process for us. We have to actually like weigh out the stuff, and does this cause like some things that are going to trigger us? Like, we have to think of that. So we do still, in long-term recovery, think, I know I have to really think, okay, is this addictive personality? Like, am I buying too many shoes? Like, what am I trying to overcompensate for? Does cause a little bit of overthinking. I get to go in and speak. I spoke yesterday at Carmi White County High School's teen conference about, alcohol and marijuana is very, it's legal, right? But it's not like you're going to the store to buy it. You're not of age to do that. And so I was able to tell my story in front of all of them. And I actually had kids that came up afterwards, which I thought, it's always great because teenagers, they know it all. I said that in my speech yesterday. I'm like, I know you guys know it all. I'm not even going to sit here and try to tell you that you don't. But they came up and asked me like questions like, how did your family respond? And like, how do people like in the community respond to you? And right now, yes, I feel like I'm respected in my community. And I ran for school board because you know what? I did not win, but that's okay. But I did on that, a mom's voice on the board, someone with lived experience, someone who can sit at a table. Granted, we do need businessmen, and we need diversity on those situations. It's somebody that, okay, I'm sorry if you never struggled and you don't take the time to understand. How can you tell a kid just come to school? Like, it does not work. It's not going to work. So, like, I'm saying, I'm going to be sitting here saying, okay, well, we need to look at the situation, and what can we do for this kid to get this kid to the graduation line? Again, did not win. Probably going to do it again. Probably going to run one more time because I was met with a lot of resistance because, well, my nickname came up and she's a convicted felon, and I'm like, I got the papers that says I'm not. So, like, we're gonna have to move. There's nothing they could say this time that they didn't say last time, and we're gonna move on from that because what I'm bringing to a table is lived experience and information and knowledge on how to get people through these things, and hopefully provide them some knowledge too. I get to go into the federal courthouse and speak and tell my story to people that are coming out of the Bureau of Prisons saying, look, I get it. You're met with a lot of crap when you come home. Maybe you don't have a house, like you said. Like, maybe you don't have an education, and maybe you are struggling because you've got an ankle monitor on and trying to find a job. So talking to them about hope, and trying to just build that. And I refer all the time. I mean, probably 5% of the people that come through the federal system, I refer to take action today because they're in this area where I'm at in Egyptian. Have all of the peer supports on speed dial. Swear, like they know when I'm calling them, like, okay, Katie, what do you need now? I'm like, well, I got this guy that needs this, or this kid, or this parent. Because like I said, I work with the kids, so oftentimes it's the parents, like addictions in the home. And so it's like I can try to do as many things with the kids, but if I can't change their environment, And so like, it's great that we're doing all this work in the office, but they still go back to that environment. So it's working with the families. And I do do family counseling too. It's not, not a huge fan of it because, again, parents don't tend to like for you to tell them or work with them to see their downfalls and stuff. So really it's working with the kid to be able to deal and be resilient in those situations, because I can't change your family and I can't give you a home. If I could, I would probably have to have a mansion and they would just have them all there. It's, healthy boundaries is good in this field. Healthy boundaries is part of this. But again, I think really what I'm just saying in my message, it was, I'd asked Mike, I'm like, what am I supposed to do? I tell my story. Like, what do you want me to say? And he's like, just, you'll be fine. And then I called Megan and I was like, oh my God, like, help me think this through. But it can happen. People can have long-term recovery, even with curveballs, even with continued life experiences and stress. I mean, it's not been easy since I made the decision to get clean. I'm very blessed that I have been able to do all of the things and face all of this stuff and still stay grounded. But it's really, truly, it's decreasing the stigma, like people have said. I mean, like, there's been so many things that is just that it's all connected, and I don't think any of us knew each other, so except us, me and Megan. So, but it's changing the mindset, oh, they're a felon, oh, they're an addict. Well, yeah, okay, but we also have a lot to offer, and so accept us, welcome us. Let's move. Once an addict, always an addict. I don't like it. All right. Thank you, guys.